Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open a masterful psychological thriller that just happens to be over 400 years old. We're diving into William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, specifically Act 1, Scene 3. Now, you might think of Shakespeare as just, dusty poetry, but what we're actually going to do today is decode this Elizabethan English into a remarkably modern playbook on manipulation, spin, and political radicalization. We're literally going to look at the exact anatomy of how a conspiracy is built from the ground up. So here is how we're going to track this from a chaotic storm to a calculated political assassination. First up, a night of terrifying omens. Then, men interpret their own reality. Third, Cassius spins the narrative, followed by forging the conspiracy, and finally, setting the trap for Brutus. Let's get into it.
Part 1. A Night of Terrifying Omens.
Shakespeare absolutely does not ease us into this scene. He drops us right into the middle of a high-stakes, cinematic, and totally terrifying storm. We meet a character named Casca. He's got his sword drawn, and quite frankly, he is utterly panicked. And honestly, you can't really blame him when you hear what he claims to have just witnessed. It's a rapid-fire list of wild, supernatural omens. He says he saw a common slave whose left hand was flaming like 20 torches, but the flesh wasn't even burning. He walks by the Capitol and a literal lion glares at him and just struts by. Then he comes across a huddled group of 100 pale, ghostly women who swear they've been seeing men walking up and down the streets, completely engulfed in fire. And to top the whole thing off, the bird of night, an owl, was sitting in the marketplace at noon, hooting and shrieking. In ancient Rome, that was basically the equivalent of a modern-day apocalypse siren. For Casca, the world has been turned completely upside down. Casca is absolutely convinced that these aren't just some weird natural weather events. In his mind, there's either a massive civil war happening up in heaven, or the world has become so arrogant that the gods are sending down destruction. He calls them supernatural warnings to the country. He is primed for panic, deeply unsettled, and desperately looking for answers.
Which brings us to Part 2. Men interpret their own reality. Enter Cicero. He's an older, highly respected senator, and his reaction to this exact same storm is incredibly revealing. We get this brilliant, stark contrast between two mindsets. On one hand, you have Casca's sheer panic. He is emotional, reactive, entirely convinced the gods are furious. But then you have Cicero's logic. Cicero calmly looks around at the storm and essentially says, well, it is a time when strange things seem likely to happen. He is calm, he is objective, he completely acknowledges that the weather is awful, but he totally refuses to buy into Casca's hysteria about angry deities. It perfectly highlights how two different people can experience the exact same crisis and walk away with entirely different realities.
And the core takeaway here is captured beautifully by Cicero. He says, "But men may construe things, after their fashion, clean from the purpose of the things themselves." This is just a profound psychological insight from Shakespeare. What Cicero is describing here is exactly what we would call confirmation bias today. He's pointing out that people are going to interpret events to fit their own internal narratives, completely ignoring what the actual truth of the event might be. People just see what they want to see. And as Cicero dips out of the scene to get out of the rain, this concept perfectly sets the stage for our next character.
Part 3. Cassius spins the narrative. Right after Cicero leaves, Cassius steps out of the dark. Now, Cassius isn't just another guy caught in the rain. He's the absolute mastermind of the impending assassination plot, and his entrance is so visually striking. He is walking around in this deadly storm with his cloak unfastened, literally baring his chest to the lightning bolts. While Casca is cowering in fear, Cassius is using the storm as a prop to prove his own fearlessness. He casually tells Casca that it's a very pleasing night to honest men. He's establishing dominance right out of the gate. He is basically telling Casca, hey, you're afraid because you are weak. I am unafraid because I am righteous.
Let's step into what I like to call Cassius's spin room. He takes every single one of Cassius' terrified observations and expertly flips it. Casca sees fires and ghosts. Well, Cassius spins that as heaven warning them of an unnatural state of politics in Rome. Casca mentions that roaring lion in the Capitol. Cassius instantly equates that lion to Julius Caesar, a man who has grown prodigious and terrifying. Casca notes how scared the regular Romans are. Casca spins that to mean Romans have lost the fierce spirit of their ancestors and have just become weak, submissive sheep.
What Cassius is pulling off here is the ultimate manipulation. He's using a natural crisis to manufacture a political mandate. He knows Casca is already terrified, so he takes that vague fear of the gods and surgically redirects it into a targeted, political terror of Julius Caesar's rising tyranny. He convinces Casca that this storm isn't about the weather at all. It's the universe itself demanding that they step up and stop Caesar from becoming king. He is weaponizing fear to build a radical movement.
Part 4. Forging the conspiracy.
So the psychological groundwork is laid, right? Now, those abstract words turn into concrete action. Cassius ramps up the pressure. He pulls out a dagger and dramatically threatens to commit suicide if Caesar is actually crowned. He frames this as the ultimate, noble stand against tyranny, claiming that the gods empower weak men to defeat dictators through the ultimate freedom of death. And look at how Casca responds to this. He says, "So every bondman in his own hand bears the power to cancel his captivity." Boom. Casca is completely radicalized. He entirely buys into the logic. If death is the only real freedom from slavery, then they have absolutely no choice but to act. And here is the exact moment the deal is sealed. Casca says, "Hold my hand," which is him saying, "Shake on it." He officially commits to forming a militant faction to cure the state of its evils. And Cassius locks it in. "Let that be a pact between you and me." This conspiracy, it's not just some late-night complaining anymore. It is officially born. They are locked into an enterprise of, as they call it, honorable but dangerous consequences.
Finally, Part 5. Setting the trap for Brutus.
The loud, grandiose speeches are over now. Another conspirator, Cinna, sneaks into the scene, and the whole energy drops to this urgent, hushed whisper. They've got their militant group started, but they are missing the most important piece of the puzzle. They need Brutus. And Cassius rolls out a physical action plan to recruit him that plays out almost exactly like a heist sequence. He gives Cinna these incredibly meticulous instructions regarding a bunch of forged letters. First, place a paper in the magistrate's chair exactly where Brutus will find it. Second, literally throw another paper right through Brutus's window. Third, use wax to fasten a final paper onto the statue of Brutus's famous tyrant-slaying ancestor. Cassius is orchestrating a highly coordinated, psychological assault on Brutus's ego, his honor, and his deep sense of civic duty. He is entirely manufacturing a fake public outcry just to push Brutus over the edge. But you gotta wonder, why go to all this extreme trouble just for one guy? Well, Casca gives us the answer using a brilliant metaphor. He talks about alchemy. Now, alchemy is that legendary process of turning cheap, base metals into solid gold. Casca points out that Brutus sits incredibly high in the hearts of the Roman people. Because Brutus is so widely respected for his honor, his participation is going to act like literal alchemy for their plot. It will take a brutal, bloody assassination in the streets, which would normally look like a horrific crime, and magically transform it in the public's eyes into a noble, virtuous act of patriotism. They don't just need Brutus to wield a knife, they desperately need his public relations value. As they finally prepare to head out into the stormy night, you have to appreciate the chilling confidence of Cassius here. He notes that it's past midnight and promises that before the sun even comes up, they will wake Brutus and make absolutely sure of his support. He isn't hoping Brutus is going to join them. He knows he will. He knows the psychological trap of those forged letters is set perfectly. The dominoes have already started falling, and by morning, the fate of Rome is going to be sealed. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to ponder. Based on everything we've unpacked in this incredible scene, is Brutus about to fall victim to the tragic, unavoidable fate of the angry gods that Casca was so afraid of? Or is he simply falling victim to a highly calculated, incredibly human manipulation designed by Cassius? As you look at the information and the narratives presented in your own life today, it's always worth asking yourself, who is spinning the storm, and what letters are they leaving in your window? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive in the Explainer. Keep questioning the narrative, and I'll see you next time.